Hi everybody, Adrian Plass here.
Yes, and Bridget, hello.
And it's number 49 in Sounding the Shallows.
I can't think of anything very significant about 49, really. 49
No,
steps?
it's the international code for Germany.
Oh, right. Well, there you go. That
It's
might be significant.
not very interesting. I've loved my trips to Germany over the years. I've been almost every year for 20-something years and had some great times there. Anyway, that's got nothing to do with anything.
No, but what is nice is that this week we have heard from quite a lot of people, haven't we, about their ideas of heaven. And they've been really interesting because they're so varied.
Yeah, heaven is interesting. It really churns people, or it gets them thinking. Somebody said, therefore, the first thoughts were peace and might not be if there's billions of people there.
Yes.
And I think this person agreed with me. Singing the same chorus over and over again for 10 million years wouldn't be too good, but meeting God and Jesus face to face and giants of the Old Testament and great women of the Old Testament and all the disciples and family and friends who've gone before.
Yeah, but you know what I love is she then said, I'm pleased Jesus went before us to prepare a place for us, but that worries me because in some translations it mentions mansions, and she said she lives in a very small modern box and hates housework. So she really hates the idea of a big mansion with loads of housework. So to her, heaven would be where there was no housework
It does
at all.
say it's dust to dust. So I don't know.
I don't know if that's good or bad, really. There's quite a few references to C.S. Lewis. There's no doubt about it. He managed to capture something. He did for me about heaven. And this person, and we do have a few that we're going to share with you, but this person said she doesn't really think of it so much in physical terms, but in emotional ones. The very best moments of time here have been when she's been with people she's loved and truly loved her. And those are the times when she's sort of felt especially close to God. So she's looking forward to meeting all of those who've loved her and who she's loved. And now she says she has a picture of her parents waving to her and saying, welcome home, which is really lovely. Yeah.
I do. Someone else says, I remember being at an Easter conference for Brethren Assemblies,
Oh, yes.
brackets, a real barrel of laughs, close brackets, when I was a lot younger, and there were twins from Yorkshire who were
Right.
contributing to a discussion on whether we would recognise each other in heaven.
Yeah.
So one said yes, and the other said no.
Yes.
But the one who said yes pointed to his advantage. If he was right, he'd be able to tell his brother he was. But if his brother was right, he wouldn't be able to do that. So that's a bit complicated,
Yeah, I
isn't
think
it?
people are going to be chewing over that more than anything else, really. You know, we had a lovely imagining, didn't we, from someone, and she just let her imagination float, really. And she says that, first of all, she was at a meeting point between earth and heaven with other people who just died, and along comes a bus. And on the bus is an escort who turns out to be Cilla Black, and who encouraged us all to talk with an icebreaker where we had to ask each other, and you can probably say Cilla Black, sir.
No, I don't think I can.
What's your name and where do you come from? But it gets worse because then she sees a group of scouts working hard and trying to get to heaven in a baked bean tin with baked beans in. Now, these are old guide songs, aren't they? And you cannot get to heaven. Well, actually, she mentions you cannot get to heaven in an old bra because the old bra won't get that far. And she found herself thinking, you know what? They'll never get to heaven that way. And finally arriving at the destination. And there's a door, and above it the name Chrysalis Gallery, known as the O Room, where you look at a lot of mirrors.
And you said, oh, every time you looked at one.
And you move from one picture to the other, an aspect of life you hadn't understood or an image of herself. And she kept feeling herself changing, leaps of faith, things she'd only seen darkly. But this is what I think is lovely. She said, I was ready. The door at far opened, and I went through it into what seemed like a cloud. And she says, I couldn't go any further with this because I realised I actually like the fact that heaven's a mystery. And we heard from someone else, didn't we, who said that he tends to overthink things, and he's been thinking about the fact that Christ said to the thief on the cross, this day you'll be with me in paradise, and that was all that Jesus felt the need to say.
Yeah, absolutely right. That was the thing that inspired me most, I think, before I became a Christian.
Nothing.
Yeah.
It was enough. And he said he thinks maybe that's enough, to overthink it, what will be like.
And another Lewis fan says that I have to turn to Lewis's imagination in The Great Divorce, which is probably commonly agreed to be his masterpiece, isn't it?
Scary.
He described heaven as real and solid to a degree we can't know on earth. And he also mentions the expression farewell to shadowlands.
Yeah.
We are in the shadowlands, but the true reality is waiting for us. And the other thing that comes out of The Great Divorce is that it was possible for someone to visit heaven from hell and to remain in heaven.
Yeah.
And maybe there'll be a way for people to still respond to God's love even after dying. And this person suggests that C.S. Lewis hinted at that possibility.
Yeah, because he doesn't know. None of us know, do we? During this pandemic, I think I really tune in to what this person says, saying that he or she have become obsessed with the question of where are they now, all the people who've died over this year. And I remember there was a time, wasn't there, where there was a child was killed, and everything, it struck us that nobody questioned where this child was after death. And there's very little talk of it. And he was saying that people who've always been Muslims, people who perished before Christ was born, and he was very struck by the fact that people who profess to not have a faith are often absolutely sure that somebody's sitting on a cloud or whatever.
Yeah, and in response to me saying what I don't want in heaven,
what, sitting around in a white robe with a crown?
So he said maybe we're all sitting around in white robes. We could start a petition to have normal clothes and get some brave committee member to approach Jesus with it. He might be very glad to change it, I think. And also says, I'm glad the angels will be doing all the cooking and washing up rather. I wonder what the food will be like. I'll bet the coffee will be good. And I know who wrote that. He's a Canadian.
Yes.
And I know he'll be looking at the coffee because Canadians are fanatical about coffee.
What is it, Tim Horton?
There's a Tim
Starbucks,
Horton on every corner, and some people like Starbucks. And I remember doing a tour there, and someone said, we've got to make a detour of about 30 miles. And I said, why? And he said, because I don't like the coffee they do here.
Wow.
But I do like the coffee in the place that we can get to 30 miles away. I was quite extraordinary.
Well, I think the coffee will be good because God did invent the coffee beans. So
now you're a barista, aren't you? 'Cause you're a bit of an expert.
Well,
on this.
I make coffee in our church cafe. It's a community cafe, and actually that makes me think. This coffee machine in heaven is going to have to be very flexible, because when I think about it, there's two ladies who share one shot of coffee between them and a lot of milk.
What they you serve in your cafe, you mean?
Yeah, and then obviously there's people who like it really, really strong. Yes, and somebody says that she would really love to be sitting quietly, to not rush, to not worry, to be allowed to be a Mary. But she says, now this is interesting, I hope there's rain. So do I hope there's rain.
Rain.
And umbrellas and woodland paths, especially in the rain, don't you think?
And knitting.
And knitting, yes. Yes, I think I might be quite happy if there isn't knitting, but the rain, umbrellas and woodland paths, I'll go with that.
And the concept from somebody else, concept of heaven without cricket. And he says, and I know this man. I don't think he's joking. That is something I really don't want to contemplate. And in honour of him and me and others who know exactly what he's talking about, I'll read yet again my cricket poem, which really sums it all up. I'm dying to live after living has ended. I'm living for life after death. Alive to the fact that I'm dead apprehensive. I'll live to the end of my breath. But what would life be were I no longer living and death was no longer alive? How would I stick it without any cricket? How would I ever survive? Would I cross swords on some heavenly lords with the angels of holding and hall? Would I face up to Lily without feeling silly and even catch sight of the ball? Would a man with a beard whom the bowlers all feared redeem us from losing a sin? Yes, by grace we'd be saved. That's a joke. as his century paved the way to a glorious win. I promise you, Lord, I'll never get bored. I'll practice the harp there, I've sworn. If cricket's allowed, I'll be back on my cloud the moment that stumps have been drawn.
It is interesting, isn't it, that the things that when you really think what you want, they're small things. Well, I'm sure you wouldn't say cricket was a small thing, but they're kind of ordinary things. They're the things that you enjoy, really. And I was thinking, we were talking about eternity and the contrast between eternity and the things that are happening today, this week, things that really affect us.
Well, what's happened in our week then?
Well, our grandson was christened.
True.
And I think what I felt about that, it is an infant baptism.
Criticism.
So, no, I didn't say criticism. I tried to say baptism and christening together. And and obviously he's too tiny to understand. But you know what I loved about that was looking at our daughter's face and seeing the joy in her that something huge is happening.
That was very good.
To a very small person. Yeah. So what about you then?
Well, this was a bit of a celebration this week, wasn't it? Because actually both of us have been working very hard on sorting out the manuscript of my new book.
Oh yeah, last week you said you were going to send it off.
That's right,
and now...
yeah, and I have. Yeah, it's called Still Crazy, and it's at least the first sort of draft has gone to the publisher, so that's great. And it's very difficult to let it go because you find yourself going over and over and over it, and all the little mistakes come back, and sometimes you can miss huge things. I remember this wasn't me, but I did a recording of a book, and when I got the first DVD or CD with it on, they'd repeated the whole of the first 20 minutes.
And wasn't there once one of your books published that had a whole page missing? I mean,
yes, there was. Yeah,
you just have to keep looking. These tiny things become ridiculously important.
And today, our little dog Gracie, who has a fluxating patella, which means the little part of her knee has come loose.
It's her kneecap,
she has an operation today, which is so small, it's tiny. But if it's not done with, she'll have major problems later. So she's in there. It's happening, and we'll pick her up later this afternoon.
Yeah.
So we're really hoping that will go well.
But these are all little things, aren't they? And I think my main task of this week has been weeding, because we have in our garden a huge amount of ground elder. Now, anybody who's got ground elder knows it's horrible, because it's got long underground white stems. They're called rhizomes. And the thing is, if you leave one tiny fragment in the ground, it will pop up again like whack-a-mole. It's unbelievable. And I know I'll never get rid of it. I know I won't. But on the other hand, I become very zealous, you know.
Yeah, you
and
do
every
love it,
single one, I want to just get rid of it. But if I keep at it, I know that I'll kind of keep it under control, but it's so easy to think it's gone. It's so easy to think, I've got a nice clear patch of soil. And then I see a small leaf appear and off we go again.
I was thinking this week, you know, with all the reports of conflict all around the world, about the fact that some things go on for so long that people forget what the roots of those things are. I was remembering a story by Chesterton. I'm probably going to get this slightly wrong, but I don't care. In his autobiography, he talks about a time after the First World War, in the village where he lived, there was a conflict between those who wanted a memorial to be erected and those who wanted a cross.
Right.
And people got very, very, very angry and determined about their selection for ending the war with this thing that would go up, and really was very, very difficult time. And in the end, they finally arrived at a point where they decided it would be a memorial that went up,
right?
And then they put a cross up. I think by the time they came to actually do the thing, I think people had kind of forgotten what on earth it had been all about. But that can easily happen, I think. But some of the stuff happening around the world now is really, really frightening, isn't it?
I mean, I was thinking, we're talking eternity, we're talking heaven. Well, at the moment, it's like news only lasts days, let alone eternity. But there's such big things. It's like world horrors that are just slapping our faces, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, the troubles in Ireland have kind of come back again. Like my wretched elder. I mean, of course, the situation in Jerusalem, the situation between the Palestinians and the Israelis. And like you say, these things can go on. And sometimes there's a treaty like the Friday Agreement or there's apparently peace. And we all think, oh, that's all right, that's sorted. But these roots, these wretched roots, these bitter roots are still growing. And then they pop up. I do find it extraordinary. I mean, the situation where the Israelis and the Palestinians have been living fairly peacefully, but have they really? Suddenly they're smashing each other and I don't know, maybe it's just a case of working away and never forgetting that it's possible for those roots to still be there.
And also the fact that the chiefs may agree, but the Indians are not so sure.
Oh yes, of course.
You've got to take people with you, and that really does take some time. I think what we've probably learned over the years is that you have to go on doing the right small thing again and again and persist with it.
Yeah, even if you don't see the results, really.
Even if you don't see the results. Some famous Christian writer said we're not allowed to see the results of our obedience, and that's true. Some of the persistence results in things we'll never see.
Yeah, I think we've shared before a story that became very important to us, haven't we, about Trevor Huddleston, who was a young white guy in South Africa, working away in a very poor area, and he always raised his hat in respect to everybody, whatever their colour. And there was one black woman who has a little son, and couldn't believe that this young white man was raising his hat to her and treating her with such respect. And her little boy ended up in hospital for ages, didn't he? And Trevor Huddleston visited him every day because that's the sort of person that he was, doing that small thing. And that person was Desmond Tutu. And who knows the effect of doing that small thing, really.
It's amazing.
Yeah. What was it James says? The ships may be very large, but they're steered by a very small udder.
Yeah,
and that's probably true.
Tongue is a very dangerous thing. I was thinking about one of the only times I've really had the chance to speak to a Muslim in Israel. We've only been to Israel once, haven't we?
Yes.
And there was an occasion, and some people will have heard this story, but it haunts me. You all went off, didn't you, to look at for the place where Lazarus had been born 18 times. I don't know, one of these 18, but I don't know. But I stayed outside and sat on a wall because my mobility wasn't very good.
And it was hot.
It was hot.
And you were tired, weren't you?
And there was a man sitting next to me who was very handicapped in his arms and legs, and he had a box with some coloured bits of card on them that kind of souvenir type stuff.
Well, it was Christian stuff, wasn't it?
Christian stuff it was, yeah. And I looked at this stuff and I looked at him and I started chatting to him, and he said his name was Zid.
I remember.
I thought he said Sid.
Yes.
So I said, oh, that's short for Sydney. And he said, no, it's short for William, which doesn't make any sense at all, does it? But anyway, we got talking, and eventually I said to him, because we were getting on quite well, I said, are you a Christian or a Muslim? And he said, I'm a Muslim. And I said, but you're giving away or selling. Actually, I think it was for donations. These Christian things, is that all right? And he looked at me pityingly and said, we are very poor, Yeah. And so that's the work he does to make the money from the tourists who come along. And as the time came when I knew I'd have to go, I didn't know what to say to him to end this little time we had, and then I remembered that quote from Rumi, the 13th century poet, where he says something like, out beyond all notions of rightness and wrongness, there is a field, I'll meet you there. And I said to Zid, I quoted that, and I said, Zid, when the time comes,
if and when,
will you meet me in that field? And he said, okay. I said, if I do meet you in the field, what shall I bring you? And he looked at me and smiled, and he thought about it, and he said, what I'd really like is a very large bar of Cadbury's milk chocolate. And we laughed together over that. And it wasn't just a joke. It was more than that. It was a moment of great togetherness.
Yeah. Well, there you were. You were two men. Neither of you could walk very well. He certainly couldn't walk at all. Both of you hot, both of you tired. All that in common. And then you find you have the same kind of sense of humour.
Yeah.
And a yearning for something more.
Yeah.
And maybe it's that yearning for peace that as Christians we need to pray about in Israel at the moment.
I just hope.
A yearning inside you that's what you want.
I just want to see Zid again.
Oh, that would be so good.
In the field.
Yes.
And if God allows it, I'm going to take him a very large bar of Cadbury's milk chocolate.
Yeah.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.